I can tell you the exact wrong second my therapist stopped being my therapist. Not the kiss, not the whine, the click. When she turned the session clock face down and said, almost a whisper, that we didn't have to watch time today. The room didn't brighten. It tilted, from clinic to confession, from workbench to something warm enough to burn. My name matters less than my wiring. 34. Project manager at a company that believes deadlines are a moral category. Spreadsheet brain, runner's knees I treat like a project, a body that stores stress in the gut and pays it off at midnight with food. When my doctor asked how often I ate when I wasn't hungry and how often I kept working after I was empty, I said often to both and watched him write a referral with the steadiness of someone who has seen this movie. That referral carried me to a small office with a quiet hum, a couch that didn't demand a pose, and a woman who would become a lesson I won't stop learning from. I'll call her Lena. Late 30s. Dark sweater, sensible boots, hair always half escaping the clip. She wore a thin gold band on a chain, not her finger. No perfume I could name, just the clean after scent of citrus hand cream that made the room feel recently forgiven. The office looked engineered to lower a pulse. Lamp instead of ceiling lights, plant that had survived other storms, a bookcase of spines that announced theories I learned to pronounce, tissues that pretended to be incidental, a bowl of polished stones that gave restless hands a job. It was safe in the way hardware stores feel safe to people who like plans, every tool labeled, every aisle honest. She began with fences. Sessions would be 50 minutes. She didn't text except to schedule. If we saw each other in public, we would pretend not to. She wouldn't be my friend, she'd be something more useful. I nodded harder than I needed to, relieved to be buckled into a process I didn't have to pilot. We started at the body, because the body was where my life kept voting. She taught me to separate hunger from urge, to use HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, like a dashboard, to narrate evenings instead of negotiating them. Fruit at 5, dinner at 7, tea at 9, bed at 10, lights off even if the brain begged for one more scroll. I scoffed in the tone of a man who believes he's too smart for simple things, then did it and woke to discover daylight can hold more when midnight doesn't eat it. Progress is dangerous when you're lonely. It feels like intimacy wearing a lab coat. Lena was careful, but not clinical. She knew how to place a single stone to help you cross a river, a sentence about grad school burnout, a mention of a sibling who worried cholesterol into catastrophe. Once, too casually, that she used to comfort eat during exams and learned sugar is a fast liar. Each piece was small enough to pass ethical inspection if you didn't stare too long. Each piece built a bridge my loneliness wanted to sprint across. I scheduled my week around Tuesdays at 6 p.m. The hour felt like a port, the rest of my life, weather. She paid the rarest attention in the city, the undivided kind. When she listened, she didn't glance at the door because a hallway clicked. She glanced at the line of my thinking, then handed it back straighter. When she laughed, rarely, precisely, my chest loosened like a jar you've been trying to open alone. The first hairline crack presented as care. After a session where we finally walked into the room where my father kept his silence, Lena stood to hand me a glass of water and let her fingers touch my shoulder for a second longer than instruction manuals allow. Static. That's all. But my skin conducted a quick experiment and filed a report. Present. I went home, cooked exactly what we'd planned, a bowl that looked like health, and still found myself standing in front of the cupboard later wanting the old quick comfort. I didn't cake it. I counted my breaths and realized I was counting her.
Weeks passed. The work did what good work does. It made me decent to myself, then asked what I'd do with that decency when nobody was watching. Lena didn't overshare exactly, but she'd sometimes align our chairs so my knees felt included in the conversation. She began to let sessions run long, 5 minutes, then 10, once to the edge of an hour and 15 with a soft, let's not stop in the middle. I told myself it was clinical judgment. Another part of me labeled it what it wanted, choosing. Then February pulled the heat out of the building. Snow powdered the black coats outside. The radiator hissed and died mid-sentence, and the air shifted from cozy to intimate cold that makes people move closer by physics. She fetched a gray shawl and wrapped herself while I admitted my yearly review had gutted me, that I felt like a loyal appliance somebody had suddenly unplugged. She said she was proud I didn't numb it that week. I said it felt like we didn't. She didn't correct my pronoun, and my stomach made a small, treacherous sound I blamed on tea. At 50 minutes, she didn't glance at the clock. At 55, she reached behind me and turned it face down. The click was tiny and unforgivable. "We don't have to watch time today," she said, the way you'd talk to a skittish animal. Outside, tires hissed on slush. Inside, my pulse stepped into the room and asked for a chair. I wish I could tell you I'm not the kind of man who notices wrists, the pale underside where a vein maps itself, or the way breath changes when someone moves from trained empathy to the real thing. I noticed everything. The thumbnail nicked by something, the crescent of chalk where too much soap had beaten skin, the striped mug she always used for chamomile and never offered me, the ring on the chain, not the finger. Add enough inches and you have a mile. The night the line broke looked ordinary until it didn't. Late session, last of her day. The heat still sulked. She said the super was working on it, a phrase New York uses when it plans to do nothing for a while. She pulled a small bottle of wine from the cabinet where she kept paper cups for birthdays and poured 2 shallow ribbons. To progress, she said. I didn't say that progress in therapy is the kind you don't toast with the therapist. When I stood to leave, we were both standing too near the same point in the room. I kissed her because I wanted to ask a question without words. She answered without words, too. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't even particularly good. It was tense and tender and frantic and quiet and then over. I was careful in a way that felt reverent and wrong. She was gentle in a way that felt like permission and apology. Afterward, the room we used to speak in looked uninhabited by language. She fell asleep quickly, as if hiding inside rest. I lay awake and watched the red router light blink like a metronome. I counted, 1 blink per regret. Morning returned heat, ethics, oxygen. She stirred with a sound that belonged to uncertainty. We made coffee like co-conspirators. She said she never does this. I said I don't either and meant it. She said we crossed a boundary but we could be careful. She said she would refer me out and we would be adults. She said we too many times. I let her. I left with a scarf that smelled like her shampoo and the dazzled vacancy people mistake for hope. At noon, her email arrived, professional in a way that sounded like it didn't know me. She wrote that we must terminate the therapeutic relationship immediately due to a boundary violation. She would provide referrals upon request and was available for 1 transition session to ensure continuity of care. Her signature block stacked credentials like bricks. My body reacted as if I had been dumped and fired, both true in different registers.
I did not reply. I wrote and unsent 9 drafts. One was angry, one noble, one embarrassingly grateful. At 2 a.m., I typed the version that scared me, asking to keep both things, the help and the heat. I deleted it, slept badly, woke hungry in a way that demanded forgiveness from food. I didn't binge. I ran in air so cold it shaved the lungs, then stood outside her building and did not go in. She called on the 3rd day when silence had become an aggression. Her voice was small. She said she had consulted her supervisor and would self-report to the board. She would likely be assigned a monitor, possibly lose months of practice. She did not say she might lose her license. She asked whether I was safe. I said yes, because I was, and because I wanted to be the kind of person who didn't make anything worse. She offered names of colleagues. I took them down like recipes and hated the part of me that wanted to ask if she was okay. I scheduled the transition session because I wanted to see her and because continuity is a spell. The day came. I sat on the familiar couch, hands under my thighs, like a boy trying not to touch a museum. She kept the clock upright and the shawl in the closet. We spoke in a language that sounded like ours, wearing formal clothes. She apologized for violating a boundary. She emphasized that responsibility was hers. She said she had begun corrective steps. She recommended a senior clinician down the block and a group for men who attach to helpers because the helper is the first person to give them a mirror that doesn't lie. I nodded. She asked if I had questions.
I asked what I should do with the part of me that didn't want to leave. She said, carefully, professionally, that grief is a correct response when a useful relationship ends, even when ending is correct. She added that sometimes endings are how therapy works. When it ended, I stood, and she stayed seated. No touch, no shawl. The door made a sound I can still hear, not a slam, a soft catch. I walked 3 blocks and sat on a stoop that belonged to nobody I knew and cried into a scarf that smelled like her shampoo and winter. It wasn't the crying of a man who lost a lover. It was the crying of a man who finally believed he had crossed a line he told himself he would never approach. The body sometimes knows what the mind will take months to translate. The new therapist, Dr. Patel, 60s, salt and steel voice, did not accept my charm. Charm is a tool I have, a polite one, and he placed it on the table like a paperweight, and then looked at me without it. His office had a window that watched people buy coffee. He opened with a minute of silence that didn't feel like a test until I failed it. I told him everything in a reportatorial way, a kind of crime scene write-up where I was both suspect and witness. He listened and didn't flinch. He said we would do 3 things: stabilize the eating, make a safety plan for the days grief tried to recruit old habits, and study the pattern that made me read support as intimacy and intimacy as rescue. He explained transference without making it a lecture, how my nervous system grabbed the only nearby model of consistent care and labeled it love because love is social glue and I had been living unstuck. He did not absolve me. He did not shame me. He gave me lists, which is how you smuggle hope into a person who worships logistics. We wrote an emergency plan on a single index card. Call before you binge, walk before you buy, water before you decide, sleep before you confess. We scheduled group. I did not want group. He said group was medicine because hearing other men say ungenerous truths about their hunger recalibrates your own. He was right. Group smelled like coffee and disclosure. One man described his week with the flat affect of someone reading weather. Fine, fine. Storm, fine. I recognized myself.
For a while, my life divided itself into before the click and after the click. The click of the clock turning over lived under everything. Food got louder at night. Shame tried to make itself useful by offering to take over. I followed the index card. I walked, called, drank water, slept badly, woke anyway. Dr. Patel said boredom is part of recovery because drama is another form of binge. He prescribed boredom like a vitamin. In month 2, the board posted a public notice about Lena: professional misconduct, boundary violation with a client, probation with supervision, coursework, monitored practice for a period. I read it 3 times. The words were dry in the way paper towels are dry before a spill. I felt 2 feelings that resented each other: relief that the system had not ignored me, and grief that a person who helped me might be punished in a way that rearranged her life. Dr. Patel said both could live in the same room. I wrote a letter I didn't send. It said I was sorry for my part and angry about hers, and grateful for the work and scared of the whole. It said I was trying to become a man who didn't take help as a shortcut to heat. I left it in a drawer with my race bibs and some foreign coins. Sometimes recovery is about what you don't mail. Work noticed I had fewer disorganized afternoons. I was less available at midnight and less apologetic at 5. I used vacation days to do nothing glamorous: laundry on a Tuesday, chopping vegetables like meditation, going to bed before I wanted to so the morning had a chance. Dana from my team invited me to a running group. I said yes, because yes is how you make a life. The group met before sunrise and moved at a conversational pace.
My body hated it until it didn't. I watched the city wake and felt less like a ghost. One night in group, a man described an affair with a mentor. His language was all passive voice. Boundaries were crossed. Feelings were had. The facilitator asked him to try again with verbs that wore boots. He said he had kissed, he had lied, he had left his phone face down, he had asked for a world that didn't exist and got it for 6 weeks, then paid rent in shame. I wrote the sentence, "use boots," at the top of my journal and circled it twice. Dr. Patel had a way of turning the obvious into a lever. He asked me who taught me that care has to be expensive. I said, nobody. He asked me to try again. I admitted I learned early that attention was earned by performance and that failing privately felt safer than failing in front of someone invested. He said therapy didn't create my hunger, it exposed it under better light. He also said I was not a villain. I was a man who made a mistake that hurt 2 people and a profession, and that repair was the only available art form. Repair looked like showing up, eating on schedule, telling the truth faster than my fear wanted to, and letting good things be small on purpose. It looked like sending a short email to HR about taking an actual lunch break, and then doing it without turning it into a campaign. It looked like telling Dana I couldn't stay late and not offering a lie to make it pretty. It looked like not running past the bakery so I could tell myself the heroic version. It looked like walking in, buying one thing, eating it sitting down, and noticing I didn't disappear. Spring took the dangerous edges off evenings. I stopped checking Lena's building when I ran. I stopped wearing the scarf that remembered her shampoo. My body returned to me like a country you leave and re-enter on a visitor's visa. I started to recognize hunger when it arrived and say, "oh," instead of "emergency." I added eggs to breakfast and didn't apologize to anybody.
There were setbacks, which is a gentle word for nights when I opened the cupboard like a door to a chapel. The difference now was the gap. The space between impulse and action had a hinge. Sometimes it swung my way. When it didn't, I wrote it down and brought it to Dr. Patel without turning it into a personality test. He said repair is measured in repeats, not epiphanies. Midsummer, the running group did a charity 10K. We raised money for a shelter that keeps its lights soft at night. I ran with Dana and learned the names of her 2 impossible cats. We talked about neutral subjects, shoes, routes, the best kind of cheap pasta. I noticed the comfort of ordinary and tried not to lace it to romance. After the race, she hugged me, light, the way runners do when salt lives on skin. I didn't elect the hug into meaning. That felt like skill I didn't need to discuss. In August, I passed Lena on the far side of a farmer's market. She was alone, hair up, carrying 2 tomatoes and the substitute for a bag you make when you don't plan to buy anything. She looked like a person in a city buying tomatoes. My legs tried to decide for me. I decided for them. I kept walking, not as a punishment, as a promise. I sent a silent wish for her to be okay, and for the board monitors to be kind, and for any client she kept to be held by fences that didn't move. My chest ached with something that wasn't desire or anger. It was grief's older cousin, acceptance. On the anniversary of the click, I made a small ritual. I took the index card down from the fridge and rewrote the plan in a new hand. I added a line, method over drama, a phrase I'd stolen from a Psyche R story I'd once heard and loved because it sounded like adult life condensed. I wrote Lena's first initial on a sticky note and folded it into the back of my journal with the letter I still hadn't sent. I went for a run before dawn and watched the sky try colors on until it remembered blue. I ate breakfast at my table. I was, in the corniest way, proud. If you want a simple moral, the world will happily sell you one. Don't cross boundaries. Don't fall for the person paid to help you. Don't break the clock. Those are correct and insufficient. The fuller truth is messier. Hunger goes where it is fed. Help can feel like heat. Professionals are human. Accountability matters. Repair is not proof you deserve to break what you broke.
A year and a half later, I met someone at the running group who did not remind me of rescue. Her name is Nora. She reads disaster memoirs for fun and thinks spreadsheets are a love language. We dated like people who knew ordinary matters. The first time I told her I was tempted to binge, she didn't offer a speech. She offered water and a walk. We bought fruit and ate on a stoop that belonged to nobody we knew. She took my hand without making it a referendum. My body did not mistake this for therapy. That felt like a graduation I didn't get a certificate for. Sometimes I still hear the clock click in memory. The sound isn't a trigger anymore. It's a doorbell from a house I don't live in. I answer it, say thanks for the lesson, and return to the room I do live in. Quiet, boring, intact. My days look like something you wouldn't watch a movie about. Runs at dawn, emails answered, lunch eaten like a person, dinner cooked when I'm hungry, bed at a reasonable hour, the occasional bowl of ice cream for pleasure and not penance. I have a therapist still. Dr. Patel went from weekly to twice a month to a number I can call when the dashboard blinks. We talk about maintenance more than we talk about miracles. Maintenance is where love lives. Once, recently, he asked if I ever wrote Lena the letter. I said no. He asked why. I said because writing it was the point, sending it would be asking for more work from a person who owed me none. He nodded the way people nod when they'd like to frame your answer and hang it in a waiting room. He told me I'd become less interesting and more reliable. It sounded like a compliment because
I don't know what Lena tells her supervisor or what she tells herself. I hope she has good colleagues and a stove that heats when asked. I hope she keeps the ring on the chain or moves it to the finger if that is what honesty requires. I hope she never turns the clock face down for anyone again. I hope I never ask anyone to. If you found this because you are sitting in a room that feels like church and noticing your therapist's wrists, here is what I wish someone had put in my hand. The feeling is not a command. It is a map of where your hunger goes when finally fed. You are allowed to want. You are not required to do the next wrong thing. Tell the truth to someone not in the room. Write the index card. Drink the water. Walk the block. Press the dull, sustainable buttons of your day until they click you back into a life that can hold you. When I think about the worst moment, it isn't the kiss, it's the click. A tiny sound like mercy mispronounced. I carry it the way people carry old injuries, an ache before rain, a reminder to be careful on stairs. It doesn't own me, it warns me. And when the night gets long and my cupboard suggests a treaty, I put my palm on the fridge door, feel the cool, and remember that clocks, like people, can face the right way or the wrong way. I turn mine gently to the truth and let the minute hand do what it does best, move on.